Being a Flyers fan isn't something you choose. It's a condition, a fate. For most, it starts at birth. Maybe you're wrapped in an orange and black blanket before you even understand what those colors mean. Maybe your first words aren't mom or dad, but let's go Flyers. Or maybe you make the worst decision of your life. You choose the Flyers yourself, falling for their history, their grit, their promise of toughness, a promise that's more of a curse. Because being a Flyers fan means inheriting a legacy of heartbreak. It means wearing your loyalty like armor, rusted and cracked, but armor nonetheless. You hear whispers of the Broad Street Bullies, a team that once struck fear into the hearts of opponents. They were legends, immortalized in stories of brutal checks, bench-clearing brawls, and 2 Stanley Cup victories in the mid-70s. A time when disco was king and your parents were just kids. But those stories are ancient history, a bedtime story for tortured souls. You weren't there to witness them. Instead, you grow up in the shadow of those legends, surrounded by fans who cling to those glory days like a raft. You don't get the glory, you get the weight of expectations, and none of the joy. You grow up hearing about the Broad Street Bullies, the legendary rough and tumble team that won those 2 cups. Names like Bobby Clarke, Bernie Parent, Dave Schultz, they echo like sacred chants in the halls of Flyers history. They weren't just players, they were gladiators, bloodied but unbowed. They didn't just beat teams, they terrorized them. Opponents walked into the Spectrum knowing they weren't just facing a hockey team. They were entering a war zone. Helmets flew, teeth shattered, and fights were as much a part of the game as goals. The Flyers were the villains of the NHL, and they wore that title proudly. 2 Stanley Cups, back-to-back in 1974 and 1975, cemented them as legends. But here's the problem. Those glory days are a ghost, a whisper of greatness you were never alive to see. And yet, you can't escape them. Every highlight reel is a reminder of how far the team has fallen. The old guard, the Broad Street Bullies themselves, are paraded out for anniversaries, honored for their toughness, while the current team struggles to win a Tuesday night game against the Ottawa Senators. You're surrounded by older fans who talk about those days like they're sacred scripture. You're raised on tales of blood, sweat, and victory. But all you get are moral victories and shattered hopes. It's like inheriting a mansion, but all you have are the keys and a crumbling foundation. Every new player who puts on the orange and black is measured against those giants of the past. Is he tough enough? Gritty enough? Does he get what it means to be a Flyer? Spoiler, he doesn't. Because the Flyers aren't the Broad Street Bullies anymore. They're a team haunted by their own legend, stumbling in the shadow of a myth they can never live up to. Every season begins with a spark of hope. A promising rookie emerges, or the team looks surprisingly sharp in preseason. The Flyers announce a new culture, or a fresh start, and you let yourself believe, because what else can you do? Training camp is electric. The players look sharp, the rookies have a spark, and even the coach seems confident. Analysts cautiously say, maybe this is the year, and you buy in. You buy the new jersey. You debate line combinations with friends. You talk yourself into believing this season might be different. Then reality sets in. The Flyers are masters of mediocrity, just good enough to keep you watching, but never good enough to actually win. You watch them claw through 82 games, a roller coaster of highs and gut-wrenching lows. One night they look like cup contenders. Next, they look like a beer league team. Every losing streak is just a bump in the road. Every struggling player is just in a slump. The coach insists they're finding their identity. The GM gives vague reassurances about a long-term plan. You know how this story ends. A desperate scramble for a wildcard spot, the hollow thrill of barely making the playoffs, followed by a swift and brutal first-round exit. Or worse, the slow, torturous realization that this team is missing the playoffs entirely. Again. But you tell yourself it'll be different next year. Because you have to. Because you don't know how to stop hoping. And then it begins. The injuries are as predictable as the changing seasons. Star players vanish with vague upper body injuries. Promising rookies fall before they can prove themselves. Your star goaltender, one awkward landing and he's out for the season. Again. But it's not just the injuries. It's chaos. Coaches arrive with promises of culture change and structure, only to be fired 2 seasons later when the locker room turns toxic. General managers rotate through, each preaching a 5-year plan that barely survives 2. And then there's the goaltending, the Flyers' cursed position. From Ron Hextall's glory days to a never-ending carousel of saviors who become punchlines. Every few years, a new franchise goalie is crowned. The kid who's supposed to finally break the curse. But the curse always wins. They struggle, they crumble, and they're shipped out. The cycle repeats. Your defense, soft as butter. Your forwards? Experts at missing the net. And the power play? A black hole where offensive dreams go to die. Then comes a losing streak. The brutal, soul-crushing stretch where they can't buy a win. Leads vanish faster than a puddle in July. And a 2-goal lead feels like a setup for disaster. A 1-goal lead in the third? Just turn off the TV. The Wells Fargo Center transforms from a fortress to a funeral home. Empty seats outnumber the diehards. The fire everyone! Chants echo off the cold gray walls. Press conferences become therapy sessions. Coaches and players fumbling for excuses. But they can't escape the truth. Chaos isn't just a phase for the Flyers. It's tradition. Injuries, confusion, unmet expectations. These aren't just setbacks. They're a legacy. And yet, somehow, you cling to hope. A new coach, a new GM, a promising rookie, the next chosen one. For a brief, delusional moment, you believe, you buy into the hype, until it falls apart again. But the worst part? The Flyers don't even lose with style. They don't crash and burn in a glorious, fiery disaster that you can at least respect. They don't have epic collapses that become legendary meltdowns, the kind you can tell stories about with a bitter laugh. No, the Flyers just fade away, quietly, pathetically. They finish just outside the playoff picture, or they scrape in just to be a first-round punching bag. They're never bad enough to rebuild, not bad enough for a high draft pick or a franchise-changing prospect. No, the Flyers exist in the cruelest spot of all, the land of mediocrity. They're good enough to keep you watching, but never good enough to give you anything worth celebrating. Year after year, they finish in the mushy middle. Not a true contender, not a true disaster, just a team that exists. A team that plays 82 games of what feels like a chore. A team whose biggest highlights are moral victories and hot streaks that mean nothing. Their biggest achievements are almost made the playoffs, almost won a series, almost developed a star player. And in those almost all, you find the true agony of Flyers fandom. Because every brief glimmer of hope is a lie. Every young player who might be the next big thing is just another name on the list of forgotten promises. And when they do finally decide to rebuild, it's not a true rebuild. It's half-hearted. Retool where they keep veterans too long, make panic trades, and draft safe, uninspired prospects. It's like trying to fix a sinking ship with a roll of duct tape and a pep talk. But you keep watching, because maybe, just maybe, one of those almost will finally turn into something real. But it never does. And yet, you can't quit. You swear you're done. You rage on fan forums. You say you won't watch another game. You tell yourself you're smarter than this. You're not going to waste another season screaming at the TV while the Flyers find a new way to let you down. But then, out of nowhere, hope returns. A trade rumor, a hot streak, a fresh-faced rookie lighting it up in the preseason. The GM makes a big speech about a new era, and you let yourself believe again. It's not just you. It's generational. Your dad was a Flyers fan. Maybe your mom too. Maybe you remember them huddled around the TV, screaming at the refs, living and dying with every goal. Maybe your grandparents told you stories of the Broad Street bullies, and you grew up thinking those were the good old days. They weren't even alive for the Cups, but the stories were passed down like family legends. Being a Flyers fan is a family tradition of suffering, but it's also a bond. It's the father who takes his kid to their first game, pointing out the retired numbers on the rafters and telling them, "One day we'll see a cup here." It's the group of friends who text each other before every game, talking to each other into believing that this time it'll be different. It's the endless debates over who the greatest Flyer of all time is. Clark, Lindros, Giroux. It's the ugly orange jerseys that you wear like a badge of honor, even when they're the only splash of color in a sea of opposing fans. Because you're not just a fan, you're part of something bigger. A tortured, angry, suffering, loyal family that never lets go. No matter how many losing seasons, no matter how many heartbreaks, you keep coming back. Because that's Flyers fandom, a cycle of hope and heartbreak. A generational curse passed down like a family heirloom, something you inherit whether you want it or not. Your dad taught you to love the Flyers. His dad taught him. You teach your kids, even though you know you shouldn't. You watch them pull on their first orange and black jersey, wide-eyed and full of hope. And you don't have the heart to tell them what they're in for. You don't tell them about the missed saves, the shattered dreams, the nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering why you care so much. Because that's the truth of being a Flyers fan. It's not about wins, because they rarely come. It's not about the stars, because they always burn out. It's about the connection, the moments spent with family yelling at the TV, riding the highs and suffering through the lows. It's about belonging to something brutal, frustrating, and yet somehow beautiful. You look at the rafters and see the retired numbers, the legends who walked the ice, and you tell yourself, one day will be great again. You don't believe it, but you say it anyway, because you have to. And when they finally do win, if they ever win, it won't just be a victory, it will be a release. Generations of suffering wiped away in one glorious moment. But until then, you keep coming back. You keep believing. You keep suffering. Because what it means to be a Flyers fan, a lifetime of pain, 1,000 tiny heartbreaks. But somehow, impossibly, you wouldn't have it any other way.